All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 107, and I have a lot to cover today. I think it's been about 2 weeks since I last recorded. Lots of NFL offseason news finally hitting. It feels like things are really ramping up after, the combine week. All of the coaches, GMs, and media personnel all meet up at a couple of restaurants and bars in Indianapolis. And, you get a couple bourbons, couple whiskeys in them, and all of a sudden they start talking about their players and some potential deals, potential moves to be made, and things start circulating to all the fans. So it's kind of an exciting time in football in general. Want to talk about the Cavs a little bit too. And then I also want to talk about an interview that Kevin Stefanski just did on Pardon My Take. I'm sure most of you have seen it because a lot of the clips have been out there, and it's probably the most open Kevin has ever been, the most we've ever heard from him. So I think there's some really interesting things to talk about there. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start with some Cavs talk. So Cavs have been on a 3-game win streak in the last few games here, beating Detroit, the Celtics, and the Miami Heat. I think the Heat win was a really big win for this team because it was on the road. It's against a Heat team that we have struggled with at times and that has a lot of veteran players. And it really matters for the seeding as we continue to inch closer and closer to the playoffs. So I feel like that was a really good one to get. But what was really fun, I think, was the ending of the Boston game. If you would have asked me in the first 3 quarters of the Boston game how I felt about that game, I would tell you that I hated that game. It was not our best performance overall, but some really interesting things happened towards the end. One being putting Lamar Stevens, my guy, in the game, getting him some more minutes. And look, I have been obviously one of Lamar's bigger fans, but I just wasn't sure what his role was going to be in terms of a playoff roster because it just didn't seem like he was getting those consistent minutes that, a Dean Wade was getting when looking at, the group coming off the bench. JV just wasn't really putting him out there all that much. But I think that last quarter and overtime of the Boston game 100% proved why Lamar Stevens needs to get playoff minutes, and that's for a couple different reasons. I think one, he's not a leader because he's one of the best players on the team. He is a leader because every single player on that court looks at him as a leader. Donovan Mitchell has talked about this in interviews multiple times on how when Lamar speaks, the team listens. And I think that's really interesting because you would usually find that would happen for, the best player on the team, one of the top 2-3 players on the team, not always a role player coming off the bench. But I think Lamar is a guy who is so confident in his ability and what he offers that regardless of if he's getting 2 minutes or if he's getting 20 minutes, he's giving it all in those and putting it all out there. And he plays with an aggression and a physicality that we really don't see from a lot of the other players. We got a lot of quiet guys, and a lot of, in a lot of good ways, it's a very team-oriented group where they want to get each other involved and nobody's really selfish. But sometimes you need guys to go out there and play with aggression and be a little bit selfish and attack the ball. And Lamar is someone who is always going to give you that. And he proved that, defensively in that game. He proved it with his ability to get rebounds. In his 17 minutes in that game, he had 8 rebounds. He actually had 8 points and 8 rebounds in 17 minutes, so almost a double-double in that time. He hit a 3 in a very crucial moment, and he was just playing hard. And I genuinely do not think we win that game if Lamar Stevens isn't out there, which is a really big deal. And then he got a significant amount of time in the Heat game. I want to say, I looked earlier and it was somewhere around 27 minutes. So I think JB's kind of like, yeah, we need this guy on our team getting significant time because he brings some energy that is really needed when, one of the starters or 2 of the starters have to come off the bench. So that was really, really fun to see. I got to watch that game in person and I had an absolute blast watching the ending of that. It was pure euphoria watching Lamar Stevens just drain a 3 like that in that moment. Ooh, felt so good. The other interesting thing from that game was the end of regulation. Of course, when Grant Williams had, 2 free throws there with, a second left on the clock, and he just had to make one. All he had to do was make one shot, and he couldn't make either. And to really layer it on, he also looked at Donovan Mitchell right before, who was very much trying to get in his head, and he said, I'm going to make both. And Donovan, to his credit, kept up with trying to get in his head. It felt like the other guys were kind of walking back and forth across, switching sides on the line in between the two shots to kind of make some movement, get in his head, see what could happen, which was super funny to watch. And it worked because he didn't make either, and that sent the game into overtime. And man, how embarrassing does that have to be that you missed both? You only had to make one, you missed both, and you said out loud for the broadcast that you were going to make both. Like, that is, you don't come back from that. That is embarrassing, and he will be remembered for that for a long time. So that was pretty funny. I think the other really big takeaway, and my last big takeaway from just the Cavs in the most recent games, Evan Mobley continues to make a leap that, I feel like has been so gradual. But when you kind of look at his box scores more recently, like against Boston, his box score ended up being 25 points and 17 rebounds. That is an insane box score. And it didn't even really feel like he did anything monumentally different than other games. But the way he has been playing defensively is just so impressive. And of course, I think his offensive game has improved a little bit. There's still some areas he needs to work on, free throws, 3-point shooting, of course, but his offensive game overall, I think, is a little bit better than last year. But man, his defensive game, I just don't even know how it continues to get better. It felt like he was already so good last year, but he keeps getting better and better, and it feels good to watch the progression he's making and the confidence he has now. So we've got about a month, somewhere around there, until the playoffs and the play-in will start up. So the Cavs are still 2.5 games ahead of the Knicks and 2.5 games behind the 76ers. So I have a feeling we're going to end up at the 4 seed, which is fine. I don't really, feel any type of way about not getting the 3 seed. I think all of the potential matchups we could have offer different challenges. So I personally don't feel super invested in the seeding, but I feel invested in us playing really good games leading up to the playoffs, and hope we can kind of continue building confidence and momentum, especially with the bench as we get closer and closer. Okay, so NFL topics now. I want to start actually with an interesting conversation that I saw when I was watching the Pat McAfee show the other day that just led to a couple different thoughts I had. So this woman named Sam Rapoport, who is the Senior Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the NFL, went on the Pat McAfee show the other day to talk about, they had a women's forum for the NFL, and she wanted to talk about all the work they've been doing and just some of the interesting things going on in the NFL in terms of women that, fans don't really get to hear about or see very much. Obviously, in the last couple of years, we've seen more and more women coaches on teams, on very good teams. And, you kind of wonder, how did we get to the point where, women are in these roles now? How did this start and even happen? Because it's shocking, of course, that, before there were none. There were 0 women. And Sam Rapoport talked a lot about their program and how it's kind of helped women just really get their foot in the door. It's funny because I feel like when people think about diversity and inclusion things, they think of people asking for handouts, and that's really not what it is. And especially with this, what women who are in sports or in football want are just their opportunity to get their foot in the door and to meet people. And that's kind of what this forum is all about, is the men already have all of these connections, whether it's through their coaching in college or their playing days, or all different kinds of ways. These men already have the connections. But let's say a woman like Sam Rapoport, who played, or Callie, who coaches for the Browns, who play football in, women's football, they don't have those direct contacts to kind of get their foot in the door. So this is an opportunity to get women who are in football, who want to be involved in the NFL more, to just meet coaches, GMs, people involved, get to talking and see if there's something there, or if, you know, one of the coaches or GMs is interested in hiring them. And it's really cool the way she talked about it was that, like, when they first started, there were maybe like 2 teams who were involved in the forum, and now there's, I want to say, she said at least half the league is present there, and coaches start to get competitive with each other, where there's a certain woman who they really like, and they're like, hey, don't talk to her, like, I want to bring her in, I'm really interested in having her on my staff. So it's really cool to see that now they're starting to get a little bit competitive over it and seeing who, you know, they like the best and kind of want to bring in. It's funny, this is something that I believe Kevin Stefanski has said before, and I know Brian Daboll has also said before, just to kind of explain like how crazy it is that I guess women weren't in football in this way before. When you're looking to hire coaches, they both have said that it is a competitive advantage to hire women, because before they were only looking at 50% of the population to hire from. And now they are looking at 100% of the population to hire from. So you have a bigger pool of people that you can look at to find talent now. And it's a competitive disadvantage if you're ignoring the other half of that, when there could be really smart people who could help your team succeed. And I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it, because it's not just about, oh, we want to, you know, look good and look like we care about women. No, we want to hire women because we want to win football games, and we believe that this specific woman is going to help us do that. And why would we ignore that just because she's a woman? So I think it's really awesome to see these like football, like Brian Daboll is such a football guy, and it's so cool to hear someone like that talk about women in football in a way that it's just second nature to him. He's like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to lose football games. I want to win football games. So I'm going to find whoever the best coach is possible. And that might be a woman. And I feel like it's just going to continue to grow and get better as more and more coaches do it. I remember Sam shared a couple of cool stats about the last 4 coaches of the year have all had women on their coaching staff. The last, I think, couple Super Bowl winners, from what she had said, also all had women on their staff. So it's really cool that it's becoming more and more of a thing. And by no way are people saying that, oh, these teams won because they have women, but these teams won because they're willing to try different things. They're open-minded in a way that they are looking for any competitive advantage and any edge they can find to win in the NFL. And sometimes that is hiring in different ways. Andrew Berry has been really big on that. In terms of a GM, and I think it's just really cool to see it continue to grow. Obviously, as I mentioned Andrew Berry there, he did last year bring in Catherine Raish from the Eagles, who he worked with there, and she is now the assistant GM with the Browns, and she actually spoke to the media for the first time recently, and I had listened to some clips of it, and it was really cool to finally hear her talk for the first time. I hadn't realized she had actually had a baby last summer, so she wasn't with the team for part of the season because she was on maternity leave, but she said actually she was, you know, very responsive like right after she had a kid, and Andrew Berry had to tell her to stop responding to emails because she was on maternity leave, but she was just so, you know, invested and committed to the team. But it was awesome to hear her talk. It was cool to hear someone again in such a high level in an NFL organization talk about how she's, you know, balancing having a family and, you know, pursuing this career that she's always really cared about, and how she's really proud of that, you know, the way that she has been able to do both, and that she wants women to know and feel like that they can do both, because so many times women feel like they have to either pick career or family. If it's a career that's very time consuming and is gonna require a lot of you, they feel like they can't have it both ways. And I just think it's cool that Andrew Berry is accepting and understanding of that, and, you know, wants her because she's talented, and isn't gonna be like, oh, I don't know, you're starting a family, so maybe we, you know, need someone who's not going to be going on maternity leave, which obviously is illegal. But I think that is a thought that people definitely would have in football, like afraid of bringing on women because of the amount of time they're willing to or able to commit, given that they're the ones that have to have children. And if they are wanting to start a family, what kind of, issues that might create. So I think it's cool that I feel like that stigma has been lifted in a lot of ways, and she's respected for being really good at her job and can also be a new mom and raise her child, which is great to see. She sounded so smart in all of her interviews, just the way she looks at the game and looks at team building. A lot of what she says, obviously I hear a lot of Andrew Berry in her. I think it's because they've worked together for many years now, whether in Philly or now in Cleveland. They seem like they would probably get along very well. So it makes sense that he wanted to bring her on. And really cool to hear from her. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Don't mean to get on my soapbox, but I just think it's really cool to hear about these different ways women are continuing to accelerate up the ladder in the NFL. And it's because they're doing really good work, not any other reason. Just smart, awesome women kicking butt at their jobs. Okay, so a couple other non-Browns things I want to talk about. Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is in an interesting situation right now because the Ravens have decided to franchise tag him, and it is the specific type of franchise tag where other teams can match the offer. So based on where it's at right now, Lamar Jackson would be making $32 million, which if we talk about, Daniel Jones just getting $40 million a year, Derek Carr just got a bag, like quarterbacks that are clearly lesser than Lamar Jackson making more money, it feels like $32 million is pretty much a joke for him. And it's very strange because teams have the ability to talk to Lamar now and make an offer. And immediately after this news came out, about 7 or 8 teams said they were out on Lamar Jackson, which to many people raised an eyebrow. It felt very strange because Lamar Jackson was not that many years ago an MVP. He has pretty much been the Ravens offense for the last few years, and they have not really surrounded him with a lot of weapons. And we know how desperate teams are to go out and get quarterbacks. We saw that last year when Deshaun Watson became available with all of the baggage that came along with him. How many teams made the call? How many teams were interested and wanted to meet with him? The fact that no one is saying they're interested in Lamar Jackson is a very sketchy situation. And, it does reek a little bit of collusion. I'm not saying that the owners all sat around and said, hey, no one's making him an offer. But I think the conversations have been happening because Lamar wants a guaranteed contract. And the last thing the owners want to do is start having players expect guaranteed contracts. They can say that Deshaun Watson was some crazy outlier on a guaranteed contract if they stop it there and Lamar doesn't get one and Joe Burrow doesn't get one and Justin Herbert doesn't get one. If those guys don't get one, they can say, oh, that Deshaun one was just the Browns, going crazy, and that's not going to be the precedent now. If Lamar Jackson does get a guaranteed contract, Joe Burrow should get one, Justin Herbert should get one. Like, these elite quarterbacks are going to start expecting that, and the owners, they don't want that to happen. So it does feel like there was, it might not have been as out there of a discussion, but some whispers between them of hey, we really don't want this to be happening, and just a known thing that no one wants to pay him guaranteed money because of that. And look, I'm not saying every single team should want Lamar Jackson. I understand the downsides of Lamar Jackson. Some teams might not want to adjust their offense to fit what Lamar Jackson does, and they might run a specific type of offense that doesn't fit well for him. That's understandable. Some teams, they might be afraid of some of his injury history, which is also understandable. I get it. He plays a very physical game since he does run the ball a lot. That is a concern in terms of the longevity you might have and your ability to get injured more easily because of that, and the amount of hits you're going to take because of that. So I understand why some teams might not be interested in Lamar, but for no one to be interested when all you have to do is match the offer or start like sitting at the table and negotiating for it, when honestly $32 million for a quarterback right now is nothing. Everyone is making so much money at quarterback now. That is like pretty low level money, it feels like at this point, for someone who was an MVP. So I think something's going on here, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks, because in my opinion, it feels a little bit icky and a little bit wrong right now that Lamar isn't getting something out there. Okay, other NFL news, Aaron Rodgers. So rumor has it is that the Jets owner has flown out to talk to Aaron Rodgers about potentially becoming a Jet. I think it's interesting because, you know, Aaron Rodgers is kind of this big domino that needs to fall in order for other things to kind of happen. Like if he stays in Green Bay, what are the Jets going to do at quarterback? Like, do they make a trade and try to make a move? I think it'll affect teams who are looking to draft a quarterback. Like, it's one of those big moments that is going to decide a lot of things. Or if he retires altogether, like that changes things for the Packers. Then they're going to go with Jordan Love moving forward. And what does that look like? I kind of think he's going to end up with the Jets. I just have this feeling like if they're flying out there to meet him, it feels to me like something's going to happen. And from lots of reports, I think the Packers want to move on from him. They want to see what they have in Jordan Love. They know Aaron's career is on its tail end at this point, and you know, they don't have much time left with Jordan Love then to figure out who he is on his rookie deal. So I think it makes sense for both sides. But man, it'll be weird to see Aaron Rodgers in a different uniform just because he's been with the Packers for so long. It's, you know, obviously very reminiscent of what happened with Brett Favre and him going to the Jets. So it's kind of a weird pattern that's falling there, but that's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to be a Jet, and I think all the other pieces are going to fall into place after that. Okay, so a little bit of Browns talk before I get into the Kevin interview specifically. As we are getting past the combine now, I've just started to formulate my thoughts on what I think we need to do between draft and free agency moving forward. And I think with pick 42, which is our first pick in the draft, I'm really starting to lean towards edge. I think we need to take an edge there because one, I think obviously Clowney's gone and we need to start developing some more people to be beside Myles Garrett out there. I think in terms of defensive tackle talent, you're just not going to find that at pick 42. And I think it makes a lot more sense to look for that in free agency. Guys who are already proven and developed at the position. I think we need guys who can play right now there. And I don't know if you're going to find that at 42 for defensive tackle. I think sort of similarly for wide receiver, there's a couple guys I might like at 42. I like, Tyler Scott. I think he could be interesting. Downs could also be interesting, but I don't know. First of all, I don't know who's going to be available there. And second, I think that would be another one where I'm more interested in looking in free agency to see what we can get there, get a dynamic weapon who's already proven in order to really beef up this offense. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Obviously, I think whatever we do in free agency will end up deciding what we do in the draft. So I think they're probably going to throw a lot out there, see what sticks, see what moves they can make. And then from there, they'll kind of decide what to do with the draft. But that is my feeling at the current moment. Okay, Kevin Stefanski's interview. So it was about a 45-minute interview that he did with Big Cat and PFT on Pardon My Take, and it was a really good interview. I mean, those two guys are really good at making people comfortable, and they always kind of started off with like some just like honesty on their part. So I know Big Cat read off one of his tweets that he had about Kevin Stefanski from the Saints game, which was actually hilarious. It was something to the effect of who between Kevin Stefanski and Dennis Allen is going to decide to stop sucking first. And it was about the game on Christmas Eve, obviously. And so he read that to Kevin Stefanski, and he read it, and then he said thoughts, and Kevin goes, fair. And I thought that was just like a funny answer, because I think a lot of coaches who have egos and aren't good at taking a joke could get really defensive in that moment and be like, what, who are you to say that? Like, who do you think you are? But instead he just kind of makes a joke of it. He's like, nah, I get it. Like, it was a bad game, and he had a lot of moments like that where he was really good at taking a joke and knew when to laugh at himself. Like, they were talking about the trick play where Amari Cooper was supposed to throw the ball and instead threw it directly to the defender right in the chest for an interception. And Kevin said, like, I would have booed myself for that play call too. So I thought that was it was funny to hear him say those things, because I think people look at him as this really serious guy, which he is. And I think that's intentional in a lot of ways. But he does have a fun, more playful side that I'm sure a lot of the players and the guys in the locker room are able to see. And look, I think his intentional, serious side is part of what makes him a good head coach. He talked about it many times on how there's so much going on in a game and the emotions are so high that he feels like he needs to be that level head because his team is going to be looking to him for how to feel in certain moments. And you don't want guys riding the highs and lows too much. So even after a loss or a win, he tries to stay pretty even keeled because he doesn't want his guys, after a game and a big win, getting too high, thinking they're the man, or after a big loss, like getting too, deep and defeated about it that they're not able to bounce back. He needs to be that level voice of reason. And I think that's something that's underappreciated about him. Because of course it is fun to see the really hot-headed coaches when things are going well, but when things are going bad, it's probably not that fun in the locker room and it doesn't work that well for all of the players. So I think, it's good now, I've talked about this, that we brought in a defensive coordinator that has a little bit more emotion and shows a little bit more of that side, because it'll balance things out well. But I think it's really important, in my opinion, that your head coach is able to keep that level mindset through the highs and lows of an NFL season, because things never go according to plan in any game, in any week, in any moment. So I think I appreciate that about him at the end of the day. Another couple things he talked about, he made a joke about, how a lot of fans in Cleveland say that, the Browns need to run the ball X amount of times and that they will win the game. And he said, sometime I should just try giving the ball to Nick Chubb 24 times to start the game and see what happens. We might be down by a lot, but we'll see what happens. And I just thought that was funny, that he kind of heard the things people were saying. Sometimes you don't know if he hears everything, but it was pretty clear that he hears the things people talk about. And I'm glad he was able to put that one to rest. It's a logical fallacy, because I've talked about it on here before. I don't need to explain it again, but causation and correlation does not equal causation. That's the phrase. And he very much understood that too as well. So thought that was funny. He had very high praise for Nick Chubb, which I know there's been in the Browns discourse world on Twitter, just people deciding to blow things up for no reason, people wanting to trade Nick Chubb. I am personally against it. I understand every point that everyone is making about the cap space that we could get, the return we could get. I don't care. I don't want to trade Nick Chubb. I don't think it makes any sense for a team that is in win now mode. I don't think getting a third round pick and freeing up cap space does anything for us to win now. And Nick Chubb to me is more valuable to this team than a couple of measly mid-round picks that we could get at most for trading Nick Chubb. He's one of the best running backs. It's hard to get any return for any running back in general. But Kevin also mentioned that Nick Chubb is his favorite player on the team. Something that he said before about him that he reiterated again is that, Chubb isn't low maintenance, he's no maintenance. Like, he just comes in, does his job. You never have to ask him to do anything. And you can tell that about him already when you're watching the games and you watch him mic'd up and all of those things. But Kevin said when people say to him that Nick Chubb is their favorite player on the team, he says, me too. I feel like he's a coach's dream, just comes in, works hard, does his job. and you don't have to worry about him at any point in time. So that was fun to hear. I think the last takeaway I have, like, obviously they went through a lot of his history as a coach, his time in Minnesota, him growing up in Philly. I think he feels, he even like mentioned just, how the way Cleveland fans want to win is similar to how bad Philly fans wanted to win before they got the one back in, 2017 or whatever. Just really knowing how much people here want to win. But man, I could just tell how much he wants to win too. Everything came back to how he wants to win a Super Bowl. Like, he doesn't care about a playoff win. He doesn't care about the small things here and there. He wants to win a Super Bowl. Just like so excited and so hopeful for the coming season. So I thought that was a really cool interview, and it was nice for fans to be able to see him in that light. And in that way, especially in the off season, where I feel like it's just going to quiet some of the questions for a little bit about him or the issues people have. Like, I think it gave them something to be really excited about as we move forward with this new coaching staff in general, but still with Kevin at the helm. So that was pretty cool. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. I think, as we get into next week with free agency, I'm hoping there's some big news that I'll be able to talk about. I think the Browns are going to make some splash moves. I have a feeling about it that big moves are going to be made for this team. So, I'm really excited to see what happens. And we will continue to chat as that comes up. If you could leave a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I would very much appreciate that. It means a lot to me when I see those come through. Share with a friend, all of that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go Cavs, go Browns.